So Mike Lawler is and Don Bacon is another name you mentioned a minute ago, but is kind of a metaphor for the corruption in the system, it would seem to me. So Mike Lawler obviously is way out there on pointless wars, neocon politics, loyalty to Israel, almost to a cartoonish point.
Yeah.
But he's also leading the charge on every other anti-human initiative that comes out of the United States Congress. Anything that's bad for the public, he's for. Anything that might help the public, he ignores. Like, what is that? What is his motive? Do you understand?
I'll go back to when he was a candidate for Congress. I was already serving in the House. And in our conference meetings, in our GOP conference meetings, the ones that we have at the Capitol Hill, we have two different type of conference meetings. Each week, there's one meeting a week. And it's kind of sad that your Republican representatives only meet one time a week, but once a week. And one is either political, and that one happens inside the Capitol. And then there's another kind that's completely and totally campaign and fundraising related. That one happens off campus at the Capitol Hill Club. And they bring in candidates. They'll bring in, any new candidate running for Congress that, of course, is only approved by the NRCC and approved by the traditional establishment Republican Party in Washington. So they will bring in these candidates into this GOP meeting. They'll have them stand up, raise their hand, introduce themselves. The speaker or the leader, whoever is talking, will praise them and explain to everyone in the room why they've got to write them a max check immediately and help get them elected because they're fighting to become part of the team. So I remember specifically when Mike Lawler came in, and he was welcomed in by everybody. I mean, he was propped up as the guy we have to fight for, one of the most critical races as an incoming Republican candidate, because it was a very close district. And it was so important. We were told it was so important to win this district. Well, I learned a lot about him very quickly. He, as a Catholic, Mike Lawler as a Catholic, was heavily supported and funded by the Jewish community there, and was heavily being supported by all the Christian Zionists. And he instantly had more support from pretty much every fundraising mechanism that there is in Washington, D.C. that supports Republicans. He had more help than I could have ever dreamed of having ever in my entire political career. And I was like, wow, what is going on with this guy? And it turns out he did win his race. It was a narrow victory, but he did win it. And of course, he instantly came into the House of Representatives completely bought and paid for by all of the establishment donor class that had supported him. He hated Donald Trump, made fun of him constantly, mimicked him, making fun of his voice. He used to attack me, make fun of me, come and find me on the House floor and make fun of me for supporting Donald Trump. And this was in the 4 years before Trump got elected as president again in 2024. And I was just like, this guy's like literally one of the worst. Well, I would say he's the worst, but Randy Fine is really the worst. But Mike Lawler was unbelievably, I thought he was a Democrat. I was like, he's literally a Democrat. He's so against all the things that Republican voters care about. And he clearly hates Donald Trump. Well, I saw this unbelievable change in him. And of course, it happened after Trump won his primary in 2024. All of a sudden, Mike Lawler, I started joking. I started calling him MAGA Mike Lawler, because he was all of a sudden like becoming Trump's biggest supporter. And he was all excited. He got a MAGA hat signed by Donald Trump, came straight up to me to show it to me. And I'll never forget the day that he had gone and met with the president at the White House. Of course, I was not invited. Only all the Republicans that hated the president before. Let me tell you, Tucker, it all changed. When Trump went in the White House, literally in a matter of months, those of us that fought for him when no one else would, who were basically like the inner circle, we all of a sudden got kicked out. And it was the Republicans like Mike Lawler and all these other guys that were the ones being constantly ushered into the White House for meetings and all kinds of things. So he came back on the House floor one day and he had one of Trump's gigantic challenge coins that's like big and gold and obnoxious and heavy. And he came up and he was like, I've got one of these, Marjorie. Do you have one of these? And he was all bragging about it. But you know what that told me, Tucker, is what I really reflecting on it now that I didn't really realize at that time was that the president not only was Mike Lawler fully bought and paid for by this and Don Bacon and all these other guys, fully bought and paid for by the political industrial complex that maintains the power structure in Washington that is completely America last. But the fact that they were the ones now first on the list to go to the White House and the ones being courted all the time, that meant that that's when the president also became bought and paid for by the exact same group of people, powerful donor class, and the powerful industries.
So the reason Mike Lawler was unusual, even in the Congress, was he was such a slavish servant of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
From his very first public statements, everything was about Israel. He comes from a district with a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read a single solution to any of those problems he was proposing, but it was always about Israel. Would you say that the group that hated Trump and then early in the term got invitations to the White House, were they all servants of Israel?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Are you kidding me? Tucker, when I introduced an amendment to defund Israel just last year, it hasn't even been a year yet. Only 5 other members of Congress, 5 out of 435, only 5 voted with me to defund American taxpayer dollars going to Israel. So that's your count. If you want to know how many members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are completely beholden to funding Israel, no matter what they do, no matter how much genocide they commit, no matter how many Lebanon Christian villages they destroy, no matter which country they decide to bomb out of their madness and desire for destruction, it was only 5. It's total 6 of us. There were 6 of us, including myself. That's your count.
I assume Massey was one of those.
Of course, Thomas Massey was one. Of course.
Yeah.
He's not bought and paid for, which is why his race is the most important race that has to be won. None of the other ones really matter.
I don't want to get too sidetracked, but since you mentioned his race, where is that race now?
It is tightened. He's still in the lead, but it's definitely tightened. I've seen different polling. It's got him anywhere of approximately 5 to 7 points ahead of this guy named Ed Galrin, who, by the way, Ed Galrin won't even show up to debate Thomas Massey. Like it's like campaign 101. If you're running for Congress, you should be able to show up to a debate in your district in front of the people that you're wanting to vote for you. And you should be able to show up in person and stand in front of a microphone and a camera against your opponent and address why you will be a better representative than the current representative, Thomas Massey. And Ed Galrin has not shown up to a single one. As far as my knowledge, he hasn't shown up at all. And by the way, he's completely funded by 3 Zionist billionaires, 100% funded, that have given tens of millions of dollars, and they don't even live in his district. They couldn't relate to Kentucky. That they only know about Tel Aviv. It's the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen happen. And Chris LaCivita is the guy that's running the race because Chris LaCivita, who does he work for? Lindsey Graham, John Cornyn, some of the worst Republicans. And he's doing everything he can, aligning himself with these 3 Zionist billionaires to defeat Thomas Massey.